He never mentions, in a sense, the capstone of his career, no mention, as if it didn't happen. Everybody I mentioned for the first time thought in the back of their mind that they could face a patient who could give them a disease where they could lose their lives. And I think fear overtook the vast majority. If we ever have another pandemic, please, Lord, get some experts in Washington who first and foremost will treat the problem. There's essentially an irrational ideology going on here. It's gone on for 300 years. It's not based in science. It's based in faith. The doctors and nurses are completely enrolled in this religion. And it says, listen, we all got to take these. They're good. The more we have, the better. It's going to protect us. And if there's any side effects, you just have to take it for the team.
Hello, everybody. So, quick notes before you listen to our show with Dr. Peter McCullough. Alex and I are navigating this wonderful world of censorship. And right before the show, Dr. Peter McCullough and I talked about how to navigate this. And we were going to do a post-show with just no censorship. With no buzzwords and to kind of let the filter off. But we decided to make the whole show available and try to keep it from getting any strikes, any sort of problems, any misinformation, things like that. So I was not ready for that. All of my questions had all of these, we'll say, censored words. And I did have a couple slips. So if you notice a blank little spot, or you don't hear anything for a brief moment, it's just because Alex is going through cleaning up all of my bad audio when I had my slips. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. And it was tough to read my questions with all of these censored words while also trying to navigate this awesome guy in front of me, Dr. Peter McCullough. So I apologize for those little slip-ups, but if you hear those little blank spots, that's the reason why. So hope you guys enjoy the show. I know Alex and I did. What is up, everybody? Today, we have, honestly, a celebrity. In my mind, we have a celebrity on. We have Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. Peter McCullough, you are a cardiologist and epidemiologist. You hold several degrees, over 1,000 publications, over 700 citations in National Library of Medicine. You've now testified in the U.S. Senate, House of Representatives, European Parliament, Texas Senate Committee, and several others regarding the response to the pandemic. Is there anything that I missed there that you'd like to add?
Well, I've been busy, but one thing I haven't done is I haven't made the Unpolished podcast. I can't believe I finally made the cut. I know you big football guys like to roughhouse with, a lot of celebrities, but I'm just a doctor, but I've been trying to help people through these trying times. Now we're going on 5 years on the pandemic.
Yeah, and it's been a wild 5 years. And I'm looking at this first question that I wrote down, and honestly, I really can't believe that after these 5 years, I have to ask it, but I'm using a power of authority to tell the audience what's going on. So, does the you-know-what cause adverse reactions? This episode is brought to you by Kissed by Fire Barbecue. Like I've told you in the past, I would not advertise or partner with anyone unless I truly believe in their product or their service. And Dave Glomp and his family, I've trained his family, I've trained his daughter, I've trained his son. Actually, now Dave is training, which is amazing. I've only been in his ear for, 8 years now for getting in the gym with me, but I'm happy to see him in the gym. He's an awesome guy, awesome family. Their values align with us. Not to mention the mac and cheese, the barbecue, everything that this guy serves is so freaking good. So if you ever get a chance to hire a food truck, Kissed by Fire Barbecue is 100% the way to go.
Let me tell you what, these mass mandated products that people initially were told, we're going to stop the organism, that was going to end this pandemic, these turned out to be the worst idea that any pharmaceutical or biotechnology company could ever have come up with. And you're talking to the only person in the world who called it ahead of time. The only
You did.
one. Yeah.
You called it extremely early on.
No one else did. Even some of the people you think, boy, they would be kind of keyed up to question this. No. I published an op-ed in The Hill in August of 2020. They come out in December of 2020. And I was invited by the editorial board of The Hill, which is largely the journal read by the House, the Senate, and the White House. And the title of the op-ed is The Great Gamble of this biotechnological development program. I called it. I said it's a gamble. You can't take the genetic code for the lethal part of the organism, inject it in the human body, and then think it's going to be safe. There was no idea of what was going to shut this off. How are we going to control the production of a protein that was known to cause damage to organs like the heart and the brain? It was known to cause blood clotting.
It was already known?
It was already known. It was already known. In fact, in October of 2020, the FDA and CDC, they were having meetings regarding the products. And they had a slide that's now publicly available. This is October of 2020. Remember, they're not released until December of 2020. And on that slide, it says, these are the expected side effects. The expected side effects: myocarditis, blood clots, stroke, Guillain-Barré syndrome, forms of neuropathies. I mean, this sounds like a disaster, and they knew it in October of 2020. When I mean they, I mean the US FDA and the US FDA, and specifically the VRBPAC, the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Group, the National Institutes of Health, and specifically the National Allergy Immunology Infectious Diseases Branch, headed up by Anthony Fauci, and then, of course, the Centers for Disease Control. So
real quick, where did Fauci go?
Well, he's retired, and of interest, he headed up a division at the NIH, and a division chief is not a very high position. So he actually never had a very high position, but was elevated to such a higher status than his job description would ever call for.
The media is very powerful with that.
Right. But when he retired, he published a goodbye letter, saying, farewell, I'm signing off, on the NIH website. And of interest, on that sign off, he never mentions the pandemic. He never mentions, in a sense, the capstone of his career, no mention, as if it didn't happen. It is really
that was his career, in a sense.
Well,
nobody knew who the heck he was.
He had a long career. Now listen, his branch, NIAID, that branch is way smaller than the cancer branch, the National Cancer Institute, or the cardiology branch. That's the one I usually work with, the National Heart and Lung Blood Institute. So his branch was not that big, but he rose to power that was, certainly far greater than his position would ever speak. But getting back to these products, so there's a slide that's, on this meeting that becomes widely seen later on that, wow, it's going to cause these side effects. Then they are released December 10th, 2020. And they're released after the primary series, which is, number 1 and number 2 that people take about a month apart, and then 2 months of observation. That's all that existed. That's all the information that was existed. And immediately hospitals said, and nursing homes, take them. Take them. They are safe. They are effective. How could anyone have known that? The American Board of Internal Medicine says, you know what, doctors, and they're the biggest credentialing body of all the doctors in America, because internal medicine is the base, and then there's the subspecialties. like cardiology and gastroenterology, they 5 days after the release of these products, they said, you know what, doctors, go take it yourself, take a picture of yourself taking it, take a selfie, and use that to convince your patients.
They were ordered to take pictures of it?
They put that guidance out telling us that we should do that. Now, again, how could the board have possibly known that? With it's only 5 days after their release. Remember, we just have primary series data in 2 months of observation, meaning no one could know what in the world was going to happen at month 4. And on top of that, the same day they're released, remember that the PFE product is the first one to be released. That's the BNT 162 product. It goes by that code name. And the same day it's released, the British Broadcasting Service puts out a program. It's called the Trusted News Initiative, Trusted TNI. And it says, we are going to unite all the major media, all the social media, all the search engines in order to stamp out dangerous misinformation about these new products.
That was the beginning of that word, that misinformation.
But how did they even know? How did they even know that there was going to be disinformation or misinformation or malinformation? How did they know? They were just released. How could they have anticipated? And you know what that was really a signature program for? It was basically, they said, listen, we're going to censor out any information on side effects. We're going to censor out any suggestion that we should resist this or people should be skeptical, and that we are only going to promote information that makes them look favorable. And the other interesting thing is when they come out, there's TV commercials for them. And it says here, take this. This will protect you. It'll protect your grandmother. They're safe. Go ahead and take them. And there's no caveat. And everybody knows that there's like always an important warning. Have you ever seen like an advertisement for a psoriasis drug on TV?
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
And of course, there's someone dancing around and they're showing their shoulders free of these psoriatic patches. And then it says, warning, may cause tuberculosis, may cause all these problems, may cause
diarrhea.
Death. Yeah, ask your doctor. But for these new products you and I are talking about, for the first time, there's advertising, but there's no what's called ISI. There's no important safety information. So immediately a campaign to snuff out any safety information, a wide open advertising program with no caveats on side effects, and no one knows what's going to happen at month 4.
Looking back, it's extremely wild to look at, especially in hindsight. We know it causes reactions. We know that. They tried so hard to hide that. They tried so hard to hide, try not to say all these words, issues in your chest. I feel like I'm bouncing around just trying to avoid these, but I want to get back a little bit. We started getting ahead with my question. So can you explain, because I know there's a difference. We have the traditional, of course I just said it, the traditional, and then we have the new, which is the new technology. Can you explain the difference between those two?
Well, previously there were 3 types of traditionals. So the easiest one to think about is just a protein. So it's just an injection of a protein. So an example is the tetanus toxoid. It's just a modification of the tetanus toxin, and it can't hurt you, and you just inject it and the body forms some reaction to it. Okay, that's pretty easy. Hepatitis B, it's the same thing. It's just the hepatitis B surface antigen, or the capsule proteins of the pneumococcal organism, or the Haemophilus influenza B. So there's a whole series of these kind of protein-based products. And So that's kind of the traditional type 1. Traditional type 2 is a virus, but the virus is weakened, so it can't take over the body. So it's called live attenuated.
The idea behind that is to build your immune system, correct? Like you're teaching your immune system to respond to the virus?
Right. So to let the virus do a little bit of a number on you, but your body can form an immunity. So an example there would be the shingles vaccine. That's one that I took. But let me tell you what, when you get that, you've had it. It's like, whew, because the virus is alive and in your arm. They're given at a huge dose, by the way, 14 times the dose of chickenpox. And you feel it, but you form an immunity to it. And then the last kind is just a killed virus. Standard flu shot is a killed virus. The polio shot is a killed virus. So those three, so protein, live attenuated, and killed. Now, with the new generation products, we had P and we had M, and they were the ribodeoxynucleic acid code for the killer protein. And so they were very new, had never been used in human beings before. No one knew what was going to happen. No one knows how long they last in the body, how the body would get rid of them. On top of that, the protein that was being coded for was engineered in the Chinese biosecurity lab. So this protein was not natural. So we had a very unnatural strand of genetic code producing a very unnatural protein. I mean, that was the gamble. Now, the J version of the vaccine was considered an adenoviral vector. So there we have a known strain of a virus, the adenovirus, which is weakened. It can't replicate, but it can actually download its genetic payload. But it also coded for the killer protein, the S protein. Okay, there the problem is we couldn't control how much of the genetic payload would be taken up. That was a gamble. Again, that version had never been used before.
That was going to be a follow-up.
Right, there's a third one that comes out, and that's the NVX. The NVX. This is very different. So NVX said, listen, we're going traditional, like a tetanus shot. We're going to make 5 micrograms of the S protein in an M matrix. And that one, everyone thought, wow, that one's going to clearly be safe because it can't multiply. The dose is exactly known. So that one finishes its clinical trials and it's ready to go. And it's about the same theoretical efficacy as the others. And it's ready to go June of 2021. What happens? The FDA delays it for an entire year until June of 2022. No one can explain why. And so when this one comes out, there's no fanfare, there's no announcements, there's no commercials, and no one mentions it. Yet it is a EUA-approved option. People at companies and schools could have taken this third option, the NVX option. And yet it's as if it doesn't exist. It's completely concealed. And I've always said, gosh, if I had a gun to my head and I had to take one of these, for sure I'd take the NVX. I wouldn't take the genetic ones. There's no way. Remember, P, M, and J are genetic. The NVX is actually not genetic. It's purely an antigen-based. And now data has emerged, and there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. It's far and away the safest product out there.
So in regards to the safety and the efficacy, there were people touting, oh, it's safe, it's effective, and it's 99 point whatever %. So obviously we know that's not accurate. So what the heck were they touting at the time? What studies were they using?
They did prospective, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials, but they were set up with so many biases to falsely make it look as if the new product works. And this is pretty tricky. The first thing is when people took it in the studies, they either took the real thing or placebo. And because the real thing is so toxic, everybody who took the real thing knew they got the real thing. And everybody who took placebo knew they took placebo. Okay, so right off the bat, we don't have blinding. So what do you think happens? So those who took the real thing, even if they get the sniffles or a cold, they figure, well, I couldn't really have the pandemic disease because I'm protected. I knew I got the real thing. So they didn't come forward for any testing. Whereas the people who took the placebo said, oh my gosh, I know I'm not protected. I better go get a test and see if I have it. So there was differential testing. So a big flaw is not testing everybody, let's say every week or every 2 weeks. So the ridiculous thing is we have this huge clinical trials by the companies. Everyone's job is going to depend on this, but there's differential testing. And yet when employers railroaded employees into testing, they made everybody test every week. So can you imagine that? So in real life, people had to test every week. Like the NFL, they had to test every week, right? But in the clinical trials, no need to test. No need to test every week. The second big error that was made is what's called failing to follow intent to treat principles. This is very important. Intent to treat means once people sign up and there's a randomization where they're either going to get randomized to get the real thing or placebo, and they're blinded, they don't know which one they're going to get. Everything counts from the time of randomization. It has to. That's the only fair way to do it. But the companies didn't set it up that way. They said, okay, you get dose number 1 and nothing counts. You get dose number 2 and nothing counts. And then you wait 2 weeks after dose number 2 and then we'll start counting. Well, they missed a ton of action of people getting sick after dose 1 and dose 2. And it was completely contrived. So there have been estimates now. There's been some great analyses. Peter Doshi, who's one of the assistant editors at British Medical Journal, is a pharmacologist, very straight up guy. And they've analyzed this, and this 90% theoretical efficacy, in reality, out of the gate was probably 75%. And the primary outcome was just, did someone actually get their upper respiratory symptoms? It was not hospitalization or death. That's very important. So they tested very low-risk people. There were relatively few hospitalizations and deaths. And in fact, there were more deaths in those who got the active product, the BNT 162. So it didn't look good from the very beginning. And the companies should have been honest and said, listen, these were the flaws. We want to conservatively tell America that this may not work. But instead, there was this full force front. And, it was April 5th of 2021. It's not that far into the campaign. Anthony Fauci comes out and said, you know what? People are getting breakthroughs. It's not lasting. It's not durable. We're going to need a third administration. The big B. We're going to need Bs given in the program.
Well, the goalpost was constantly moving. Every time there was a failure, it was first, we're not going to get it. Oh, well, now you're not going to be hospitalized. Oh, well, now you're not going to die. And it was pretty insane to me how many people didn't realize that they were just moving the end. They were moving the goalpost every time something failed.
That's a great observation. Moving the goalpost is a great analogy. Also, to remember how politics played into it. Remember how Harris and Biden said, we'll never take one that was developed under Donald Trump. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And they're in office within a month or two. They're taking it. And there's on my Twitter feed today, there's a clip from Kamala Harris, and she's wearing an N95 mask, and on top of that, a black mask. And she said, these are developed by scientists, and the scientists say they work, and I trust the scientists, and everyone should take it. And it was like, okay, we're going to play back that clip for everybody to listen to. That was somebody a few months earlier said they weren't going to take it if it was developed under Donald Trump. So, I'm a public figure too. You're a public figure too, Steve. I don't have things in my wake that I go back and I regret what I say. And I have thousands and thousands of hours of analysis and clips, frequent contributor on Fox News and Newsmax and Real America's Voice and One American News, and I've been on ABC. I don't have things like that. I don't say things and then make a complete reversal a few months later. And I have to tell you, I've been in Washington now several times, had a chance to actually meet and get to know these people. There is no one in Washington that I've met that I think is more competent than me. Period. There's people, they can't keep track of what they said. They can't read. They can't analyze. They can't make hard decisions. I mean, no one. And even at the office of the president right now, I've become convinced now, kind of following these presidents, I am supremely confident I could do a far better job, far better in every aspect as president than they could. And I'm so disappointed.
Oh man, we talk about it all the time. No matter who you're voting for, these are our two candidates. We have so many awesome, smart, intelligent, amazing people, and these are our two candidates. These flip floppers and these people who are clearly bought and paid for in so many different ways. I want to get back.
I used this analogy, Steve, since this is kind of the week of presidential politics. I said, listen, we're essentially a two-party system. You either got to jump in a Ford or you got to jump in a Chevrolet. And you got to ride one of those two, even though you've got Lexus and you've got Ferrari, you've got Porsche.
That's a great analogy.
You've got all these other great cars. You got to ride in one of the clunkers, and you have to get over the finish line. And
that's a great analogy.
And since I'm the only one who called it ahead of time, you can't interview someone else who called it ahead of time. I can't find them. I keep asking, tell me anyone who in a single person saw this, figured out how to treat people, published it, made the right calls on the mass mandated products, now has figured out a way to actually help people get out of the damage who took these things in a single person and has published all of it. And I see patients face to face. I don't mail it in by telemedicine. You're looking at the only person in the world.
So now, why do you think that is? Do you think that's because, nobody's as smart as you? Or do you think that's the powers that be that made people say, you know what, I shouldn't say anything. I shouldn't put my career on the line. I shouldn't put my license on the line. I don't want to get censored or whatever. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, of course, it's a combination of all of the above. Let's just take the medical orthodoxy. The 1 million MDs, 90% are MDs and 10% are DOs, the 500,000 nurse practitioners, and let's say the 7 million nurses. I mean, that's a big group. You'd wonder, why are you talking to the only one? The only one out of that entire group. I think part of it is this notion that people respond to fear very differently. And remember, everybody I mentioned, for the first time, is experiencing their very first pandemic. Everybody I mentioned, for the first time, thought in the back of their mind that they could face a patient who could give them a disease where they could lose their lives. The thought creeps into people's minds. And I think fear overtook the vast majority. Fear overtook the vast majority. And then when there were very relieving solutions that were offered that seemed to really satisfy and ameliorate those fears. Let me give you an example. When Trump said, you know what, doctors, you can close your offices and you can do it by telemedicine and you can just bill the same anyway. Ooh, all the doctors shut their offices, said, hallelujah, we can just mail this in by telemedicine. When all the hospitals said, listen, you can shut down your operating rooms and your your cardiac catheterization laboratories, we're going to have a boatload of COVID relief money coming in. So don't worry, your balance sheets are going to be fine. You guys can take a little break for a while. And how about this one? You don't have to treat it. You don't have to get face-to-face and risk yourself. Nothing works. We know ahead of time, nothing works. The only thing that's going to work later on is what we offer on December 10th, 2020, the new biotechnology. That's going to work. Nothing else does. So think about this. You don't have to see anybody who's got it. You don't have to risk yourself. You can still make all the money. In fact, the hospitals will take more money. And you just have to ride it out till you'll take it. Now, when it comes, you better take it. And you know, everybody you know better take it. And in a few months, if you don't take it, boy, you're going to be mandated to take it. But yeah, I think the fear was a big part of it. The money was a big part of it. And then when people saw what could happen, they said, oh, well, let's look at Dr. McCullough. Boy, he's going to lose his job. In fact, Dr. McCullough lost his job. They're going to write, slanderous, defamatory op-eds in the New York Times, which they did the day after I testified in the Senate. There was a pre-planned, pre-written defamation piece written by Ashish Jha, who is a minority witness, the White House coronavirus coordinator, a year later, and it was called "The Snake Oil Salesman of the Senate." Can you imagine this junior doctor who has a fraction of my scientific accomplishments, never saw a patient, never treated a patient, is calling me, his academic senior, he's calling me a snake oil salesman?
He's definitely punching up. He's punching up, and he's trying to get his name known. But we've seen what happens with this pharma machine, and we've seen what happens with drugs like Vioxx, which we know had some adverse reactions. We've got shows on Hulu, we've got shows on Netflix showing the pharma playbook. What can we do to stop this revolving door between pharma and FDA and all these organizations that so clear, to me at least, so clearly seem to be working together? Are we seeing any traction changing this? Or what can we possibly do to change this problem?
Yeah, normally market dynamics would come into play. It's like, okay, there's a syndicate. It's a government, pharmaceutical industry, foundation syndicate, and they've got products. And the products are for sale. But if we don't buy them, the syndicate goes down. The reason why that's not happening is the products are bought by governments. In fact, massive numbers of doses are bought by governments, and they're not used. And so they sit on the shelf, they go bad, and then pharmacies have to dump them down the drain. So market dynamics are not working. We have Democrats and Republicans who are completely bought into this. We've had two presidential administrations completely bought into this. And this syndicate keeps going, and it's not just the pandemic, but it's the bird illness, and as well as the monkey illness. Those also have been kind of fired up, have had massive infusions of government cash. So I wish it was so easy as to say, well, we can just vote a new person into office and they can handle it. No, something has really, really gone out of control. I think what people should do, you're asking kind of what can John Q. Public do? They can first, take stock of themselves and kind of opt out of participation and say, listen, I'm not going to do it. And then people say, well, you're going to lose your job. And people have to be willing to say, listen, I'll lose my job. Now, you probably heard the report that the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority, people, didn't want to take it. They were fired. They've now been reinstated with some pretty handsome awards, something like $1 million.
I just saw
each.
that.
Yeah, we've seen reinstatement of New York City workers. all over. I've been in some court cases where people unfairly were summarily dismissed. It turns out these emergency products never worked. Virtually everybody who took them got the illness anyway. They were equally hospitalized or died. They never reduced hospitalization and death. Our CDC director came out August 15th of 2021, Walensky, and said, full stop, they don't stop transmission. They don't. I mean, there was weddings where everyone, they made everybody take it and they all got it anyway. There were military, naval vessels where everybody got it. And it was so obvious they didn't work. And so with these announcements, the thing that amazes me is when the announcement comes out saying they don't stop transmission, most of the mandates started after that point. That's when the NFL says, we're going to mandate it.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong too, but we knew pretty early on that the best immunity was getting it, the virus itself, and not getting the you-know-what. Even there were even comparisons showing that. But
Natural
that was denied
versus
completely.
Synthetic. Yeah.
And you were a kook if you said that. You're like, oh, come on. That can't be true.
Well, for every other illness, the natural always beats synthetic, right? So if you got mumps, the natural infection provides protection. You would never take you'd never take a product for that afterwards. So natural always beats synthetic. Synthetic is always, modestly effective, if anything. Of course, there's always side effects. Now, here's the important thing. For this class of products, unlike a drug, this class of products, the efficacy or how good it works is always theoretical. This is very important. It's not real. It's theoretical. So if you took one of these products, but you never came in contact with the illness, the claim would be that you're protected from it, but in reality you never came in contact with it. So no, that's only in theory. Or if you had the illness before, you have natural. So when you get the synthetic, it's not like the synthetic does more than the natural. So if you don't get it because you had prior immunity, this is a prior immunity. Or if you took it and the organism mutated to a much milder strain and you barely felt anything, it wasn't because you were protected by taking it, it's because it mutated. Or this is the third reason, is that if you actually followed McCullough protocol and you were smart and you had early treatment, that's actually what made it mild and prevent hospitalization and death, not taking one of these genetic products. So efficacy is only theoretical, and what really carried the day was natural immunity, the virus mutating to milder strains, and early treatment. And it turned out the people who took it were far healthier than those who didn't. It's called healthy recipient bias. That they were far more worried about the illness, so they were actually seeking early treatment, like my protocols. And the people who didn't take it, they were too sick, too old, didn't care. The biases were much different. So efficacy is only theoretical, but safety is real, because when someone took it and they got a blood clot or a cardiac arrest, that's a directly observable real event.
So I want to touch on that. When the pandemic was happening and people happened to be dying, everything was the C word. This is how this was cause of death. But then when it comes time for sudden heart issues or cardiac issues, there was no way it could have ever be the shot. Mm-hmm. Why? I guess my question is, why in the world would I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
But here, let me help you out. Why the double standard, right?
Yes.
So there's a tradition in infectious disease. And it's done in respiratory diseases. And this has gone on for years. If let's say a nursing home patient gets sick and they get confused, they go in the hospital and they test positive for influenza. And it turns out they end up dying of multi-organ system failure or a hip fracture at end of life, and they test positive influenza. What the CDC says is, listen, we can't possibly really figure out why somebody died. We're just going to count it as an influenza death. That's what they do. It's just a convention. Now, this is before the pandemic. Now, when there's adjudication and people sift through the records, look at the x-rays, make all their clinical determinations, the percent of cases like that are really due to influenza as the cause of death is about 15% of that. So we know it's a fraction. So now the pandemic starts, and we hear about pandemic deaths, that people are getting sick and they're dying. But something is different now. And I can tell you, I to this day, I strongly question the mortality data. Because do you remember turning on CNN or Fox or CNBC?
They had the death tracker.
The death tracker? Well, listen, I had some patients myself die, okay, of my own, so during this time. From the time they died to the time that I found out about it, we got the death certificates, I looked over the records, I filled out the death certificate, I got it approved by the state of Texas and everything else. That's about 6 weeks. 6 weeks. These death trackers, every minute were clicking up. And I was asking myself, how are they possibly getting the death certificates? How do they know people are really dying or not? And to this day, no one can tell us where this feed was coming from. So there's a lot of strange things about this. We were told the deaths almost exclusively happened in the hospital. Well, wait a minute. People have heart attacks and they die at home. People have pneumococcal pneumonia and they die at home. Why is it for the pandemic illness they only die in the hospital? That was immediately suspicious. Now, when we go through the death numbers, and at one point in time it was 1,000 deaths a day. That's what people will use to say, listen, we had to do something. We had to bring in these genetic products. 1,000 deaths a day. What we know there is the vast majority were elderly. I think 40% were actually beyond their life expectancy from senior homes, congregate living. That's a huge chunk. And then when there's adjudication, again, sifting through the records, looking at the x-rays, what have you, CDC data, it's about 10% were really due to the pandemic illness. 10%. The Italians have done this. They're down to 3% were really due to the pandemic illness. So when we take that, the real number of Americans who really died of this pandemic illness is probably about 120,000.
So how does that relate to other pandemics? I know that we refer to this as, some people's first pandemic. What are some other diseases or viruses, and what are the numbers that they've done?
Well, the Spanish flu is about 20 million.
It's not even close.
Not even close. Look at look at suicides. I think that's 600,000. Well, you can check me on some of these numbers, but there are way bigger numbers for other.
Well, I think obesity just in general would crush that number. Obesity-related illnesses.
Here's another way to think about this: is that you knew something was off regarding the attribution because during the pandemic years 2020, 2021, essentially there was no influenza.
We've talked about that before on the show several times.
Right. So you can imagine someone from the nursing home is confused. They have a fever of 104. They're brought to the emergency room. The hospitals are going to get a bonus if they have the pandemic illness. But if
financial
they have
incentive.
Yeah, if they have influenza, no bonus. So somehow the testing just slides into the pandemic PCR test. That's
When the
what you end
PCR
up with.
test was adjusted, it was adjusted at a certain number of cycles, and they quickly changed that after almost everything was testing positive for the C.
Yeah, so you remember I told you I think I could clearly outperform any president, anybody even close to Washington. So what I would have done on testing is I think the CDC had it right. We should have kept the cycle threshold at under 28, and that was reasonable. The companies immediately made cycle thresholds of 45 and higher, and that's the fault of Abbott, Roche, and these other companies. They should have followed the CDC. The CDC should have held to their guidance. The hospital should have held to the CDC guidance. And on top of that, we should have used confirmatory testing. So for a case to really be real, they should be positive by PCR testing and antigen-based testing. Because, listen, this meant quarantine. This meant a lot of expensive procedures. This meant people losing work. Do you remember contact tracing? Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, nobody talks about this anymore. The most ridiculous activity of all is that if someone was, quote, positive, then somebody else in public health was going to be calling the family members and trying to figure out what a ridiculous,
How about
ridiculous activity.
How about the 6 foot distance? What an arbitrary thing. Like 6 feet, you're good. 6 feet in a mask.
6 feet. Here's another one. What about outdoor masking? This idea that you could be on a bicycle path on a lake and you could kind of shoot the virus across the lake to someone else, and everybody should be wearing
Still people to this day wearing a mask in their car with the windows down. I just saw someone today doing that.
Yeah. Or
what a crazy powerful brainwash machine.
But the sad thing, I went on Fox News dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times, and so many times I was asked about masks. And I would say, listen, this is a serious problem right now. Spending time on masks is taking time away from treatment protocols, saving lives, saving our economy. And I read Scott Atlas's book. Scott and I were both writing opinion editorials in The Hill in 2020. And Scott, according to his own book, I read the whole thing in the White House, when he was meeting with Trump for 9 months, all they did was talk about masks and lockdowns and social distancing. Can you imagine? Not a single paragraph, not a single word on how to treat the problem. If we ever have another pandemic, please, Lord, get some experts in Washington who first and foremost will treat the problem, not talk about everything else. Remember, social distancing, lockdowns, and masks, as well as the emergency genetic biotechnology, those only apply to well people. At any given time, we had a limited number of very sick, vulnerable people. All our focus should be on sick people. But instead, this was so ridiculous, no one was focusing on the sick people. The sick people, sadly, were being undertreated, not treated, inappropriately treated, and they were dying, and all the focus was on well people.
I think my biggest ick, I own a gym. I think my biggest ick with it all during the entire thing is no public figure, no person of any authority stood up and say, hey, maybe you should start working out. Maybe you should take your health a little more seriously. Maybe you should add fruit and vegetables to your diet. Maybe you should stop eating processed junk food. Not a single freaking person talked about just health in general at all. What was the only thing that would save you? The shot.
There you go. Well, there was a paper from Poland that analyzed, they had a diet score. They analyzed people's diets. And sure enough, those, on the best diets, they had the least frequency of the illness. They had less severe cases. The entire NFL, I don't think there was a single hospitalization from the illness. The athletes came through this just fine. The Big Ten had a program for athletics where they, about 30% of the athletes, by the way, got it in 2020, 30%. And they got through the illness. They're fine. No hospitalizations. People did A-OK. That was a great test run. When we saw 2020 and we saw people like you and me getting through it just fine, we should have known right there that any biotech program was going to be very limited, like maybe the highest risk people who haven't gotten it yet. But what we saw was just the opposite, where it's like, wait a minute, everyone should take it. Even today, do you know the population that's effectively forced to take these? They're little babies. They're little babies. My mom is at a senior home in Dallas. My mom says they haven't talked about this in 2 years, 3 years. She goes, you never hear about them. They don't hear about the Bs, the second, third ones, the ninth ones. But it turns out if you're immunocompromised, the CDC just listed number 9. People should have 9 of these over time. Can you imagine 9 of anything? But you know, the babies, it starts at 6 months. And in states like California, Connecticut, New York, they basically, K through 12 schools say, listen, that kids can't go to school until they have the entire schedule complete.
I think not long ago, I saw you sort of questioning and wanting to look back into this entire childhood schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So
doesn't look good. That doesn't look good. Yeah.
I think there are a lot of questions, valid questions that can be asked about the entire schedule or about how it's increased from, how many, I said it again, make a note, Alex. How many did you take when you were a kid?
There was a total of 3 administrations, and it was for 5 different diseases. Now,
76?
No, it's actually, it depends if you consider the pandemic ones, and also, a monoclonal antibody called Beyfortus. And, so not only has the number of different products increased, the intensity of it has increased in administration, the numbers have increased, and the mandates have become more stringent. I think everybody could be okay if it was completely elective. If this is kind of your thing and you want to do it and your family wants to do it, fine. But when people feel forced into doing it so they can go to school or be in the military or get a job, the mandates, I think, is what really ratchets. It increases the stakes of what's going on. So at 1 year of age, I counted up the schedule. In fact, I was on with attorney Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel, and I gave the number, and there was a pediatrician who wrote in, oh, Dr. McCullough's exaggerating. It's not that many. I said, oh, yeah. So I counted up, and I made an image of the current schedule, and I put in red numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. At 1 year of age, it's 16. 16. Now, some of them are in combination products like MMR or TDP. But the point is, they're different diseases. 16.
While
now,
at the same time...
Listen, if I gave you 16 pills across different categories, blood pressure, cholesterol, antihistamines, steroids, kidney drugs, bone marrow active drugs. If I gave you 16 drugs at once, I can tell you the chances of side effects are through the roof. Now, if I gave you one pill, one by one, that's different. But 16 all at once, all of these stimulate the immune system. Some kids are going to have a bad reaction, for sure. And our CDC has published this. And in fact, probably that one of the most serious things is a febrile seizure. So the kids get such a high fever, there's so much inflammation in their body, the brain can't handle it. The brain is, in a sense, being fried. It's a 1-year-old baby, and they have a seizure. Now, if that seizure is witnessed and the parents can revive the child and bring him in the ER and cool the child down and give Tylenol, they can survive. But some children just die right there in the bassinet syndrome. It's called sudden infant death syndrome. And it turns out that 50% of SIDS occurs within a big battery of these within 2 days. 78% is within a week. So it's so clear that that's the cause. And now there's probably about 200 papers suggesting that the childhood neuropsychiatric disorders are related to the brain being fried during this process. It's called this kind of immune dysregulation up into the brain through inflammatory factors called cytokines. And these disorders are attention deficit disorder, the Asperger's disease, autism spectrum disorder, seizures. 16 at once. And the thing that's astonishing is that nobody in pediatrics is saying, wait a minute, maybe something's wrong here. They've never been safety tested to give all 16 at once.
Well, they make money.
Guaranteed money.
Guaranteed money. They make more money if they get the full schedule on. The more they get in, the more they shoot it in, the more money they get. But I always thought it was funny, like you said, 16. But the same 1-year-old shouldn't have honey before the age of 1. The same 1-year-old, we should try one food at a time. You should only try, you should introduce your foods very slowly. But we can inject or shoot these chemicals, these dead viruses into this little tiny immune system. Never, ever made sense to me. And that's why we made the decisions we made.
But because, Steve, I think there's essentially an irrational ideology going on here. It's gone on for 300 years. It's not based in science. It's based in faith. The doctors and nurses are completely enrolled in this religion. And it says, listen, we all got to take these. They're good. The more we have, the better. It's going to protect us. And if there's any side effects, you just have to take it for the team. And so there's really no compassion. Do you know doctors have taken these and they've died, nurses have taken, and they just kind of take it. There's no outrage. There's no outrage.
Well, you're not allowed to question anything.
Well, no, but you'd think that there would be a spouse here and there that would just go nuts. And there isn't, because this religion is so strong. It's a religious belief. It really is. And it's not.
I can feel that.
It's not rooted in science. That's the reason why people just kind of accept it. And, say, okay, well, they develop autism. Let's not investigate that. No, it can't be. Let's look everywhere. Let's look everywhere except for the obvious disturbance that we do in a normal child by getting a battery of this. This is analogous. Do you know that the World Health Organization, when they were investigating the Chinese lab, we wanted to send 3 independent scientists over there. Brett Gerard, who's one of my contemporaries here in Dallas, I went to medical school with him. He was on the White House task force. He sent 3 independent scientists. The World WHO said, no, we don't want them. We want Peter Daszak. Well, Peter Daszak was the guy who helped the Chinese make it. He was the coordinator. He had been into that lab a zillion times. So Peter Daszak goes over there. He looks around. He goes, I don't know where it came from, but it definitely didn't come from the lab. Can you imagine that? Like, here it is. He knows he created it with this team. And he goes over there and says, it came from anywhere except from there. There are doctors that would say, listen, we don't know where this autism comes from. It could come from anything, but it didn't come from the big whopping battery that the child takes at the well baby visits. And, when I was a kid, autism was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 36. It's so obvious. The parents say, listen, they were fine. The kids are born fine. They go up to one of these big rounds. They get it all at once. The parents said, listen, they got a fever. They got really sick. And after that period of time,
not the same.
They never looked at me again. Yeah.
And those mama bears, they know what the heck they're talking about. They know their kid better than the doctor does. And man, we're opening up a whole can of worms here. I wish I had more time with you, but I also don't want to hold you up. So we are very close to our time limit. I got a couple more questions for you. Okay. I want to talk about your McCullough protocol. I've been dishing this out to anyone and everyone, my uncle included. My uncle actually has an adverse reaction from the shot. One, what is it? So it's bromelain, nattokinase, turmeric. You have a whole detox protocol on TWC Health.
Right.
And we used to have to get these supplements separate, But so can you talk about your McCullough protocol and then results or studies that you've seen it working on people?
2 peer-reviewed publications, one in the Journal of American Physicians and Surgeons, the other one is the Springer Nature Journal Curious. I'm one of the authors, the anchor. McCullough Protocol Base Spike Detoxification is copyrighted in my name. I have no financial gain from this, but I tell you, I have a lot of accountability. And if this didn't work, I would hear about it. We've got thousands of people under observations. Probably takes about a year or more of taking these supplements dedicated on an empty stomach, nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. The doses, you can find them, twc.health or my website, petermcculloughmd.com. These are standard doses. We commonly now double or quadruple them. We measure antibodies against the protein that's made from taking these, so we have an idea of how much people have in their body. It's a very useful test. Everybody should be asking for the S protein antibody that's offered by Roche Alexis system on LabCorp request. And we get going with this. We can add prescription drugs depending on the syndrome. Most common one prescribed for any of the chest syndromes, including the fatal one, is colchicine. We should see a lot of people on colchicine, inhibits the inflammasome. It's actually vital for anybody that we think has any heart damage from taking these. Blood thinners, we use standard blood thinners for blood clots. We use hydroxychloroquine for the autoimmune syndromes. And if there's persistent viral replication, if we think this is going on with headaches, lancinating pains, skin rashes, night sweats, we'll actually use ivermectin. We'll use ivermectin for 30 to 90 days.
The horse dewormer.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you what, we figured this out. I've seen and directly examined hundreds, if not thousands, of people. They are getting better. I've held major calls in the UK. Said, Dr. McCullough, you hit it. You know, it's of interest. When I first published this as a proposal, and we studied everything else. I tried a lot of things that didn't work. When I first published this, do you know instantly on Instagram there was a note that said, this isn't going to work. This doesn't work. How did they know it doesn't work? Now, if I would have published, listen, drink some cucumber juice, nobody would care. But because I hit the right idea, immediately it was flagged as it doesn't work. So whenever you see something censored, like this show probably gets censored, that's where you want to listen, because that's the truth. That's how we're going to get people through the pandemic.
Dr. Peter McCullough, hugely appreciated. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Absolutely keep up everything you're doing. I've been keeping up with you since the very beginning. I've dished out your protocol everywhere. Thank you so much. And keep up all the great work, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.